Welcome to Whispering Loudly, the award-winning Workshop Whisperer podcast, as featured by Apple, with Rachael Evans, the #1 automotive business coach in the aftermarket. Thanks to Platinum sponsor Podium and Titanium sponsor Mechanic Desk.
Whispering Loudly is the Workshop Whisperer podcast. Hello, I'm producer Mel, and I'm here with Rachael Evans today, aka the Workshop Whisperer, and Brett Crusher Murray. We're so excited to have him on the podcast. A little bit about Brett. He left home at the age of 16 to start his journalism career in regional New South Wales, and almost 4 decades later, he's recognised as one of the most knowledgeable, generous and successful media and activation entrepreneurs in the world. His company, BAM Group, is one of the most recognised and respected in the world of sports and major events, while his news website, speedcafe.com, is the #1 independent motorsport news site in the world. It had more than 50 million page views in 2020, despite the disruption of COVID-19. That's absolutely incredible.
To add to that very detailed introduction that Mel just did, what can you tell our Whispering Loudly audience about yourself?
I'll be probably a bit humbly, you've done it all for me. Pretty much just started journalism when I was 16. I left school, moved and lived in another city, and forged my way in the journalism world in Albury and Wagga, the Riverina area, and then arrived on the Gold Coast 1989. And then set up my own PR company, worked with a newspaper, the Gold Coast Bulletin, for 3 odd years. And then in 1992, set up my BAM Media, which then grew into the BAM Group. And then, things have just stemmed from there, really. I've lived in the States a couple of times, managed major events, probably the Gold Coast 600 or Indy 300, as it once was known, was probably the most famous. I looked after that for 16 or 17 years and developed that into one of the world's leading events. Looked after many drivers and athletes and other major events over time, and enjoy life. Have a great family and great bunch of mates, and try and enjoy as much as I can.
Well, there is so much to delve into about your career, but I'm sure our listeners would love to hear about the incredible feat of your entry into the 100th Indy 500 in 2016, the world's biggest one-day sporting event. Can you tell us about this achievement, and how important was it to you to keep your promise to Sir Jack Brabham in supporting his grandson, Matt?
Yeah, well, I guess the 500 was always a lifelong dream of mine. I went to my first race there in 1993 and fell in love with it. It was an amazing place, and it's one of those places you can't oversell. You can't tell someone how good it is, and then for them to be disappointed, it's just it's massive. And I made a promise that I would have my own team in the event one day, which we managed to do. It was like, okay, I keep telling my son that he can do anything he wants to do, so I better shit or get off the pot, as they say, and put it together and made it happen and set a bit of an example. And Sir Jack was a good friend of mine, a good friend of the Brabham family, and I did promise to Jack before he passed that I'd help him with Matthew's career, his grandson, and I didn't realise it would mean putting my house on the line by running a car at the 500, but anyway, we did that, and it was certainly one of the highlights of my career, and my family and my mates and all the people that come along on the journey with us.
Wow, putting your house on the line, that is big.
Yeah, well, thankfully, Matty managed to keep it off the wall and we didn't have to go and live in a tent, so that was a good result.
So, Brett, here at the Workshop Whisperer, we've been able to help lots of auto repair shops transform from a business that was close to extinction to become a thriving one. What's your experience with turning something around that could have potentially failed?
Oh, I think it's probably a really good one. I've played a role in rescuing several events in Queensland and around Australia, but probably the biggest one was in 2009, where A1GP was supposed to replace IndyCar on the Gold Coast. And they didn't turn up. And I knew they weren't going to turn up. Anyway, it's a long story short. It's all in my book, which I'll get a plug in for the book. That we document it quite well in that book. It's one of the few things I've ever kept a diary on, to be honest. But basically, the event was basically going to be lost. The government could have actually gone under, and we managed to reorganise, created a new category called the Protect Legends, and called on some great friends of mine across, the Dick Johnsons, Common Bonds of the world. And we pulled it together in basically 6 days. Got cars, drivers, suits, reorganised the entire event. and we still managed to get 220,000 people there over 3 days, 4 days. So it was a massive amount of work. I think I had something like 8 hours sleep for the entire week, including a couple of all-nighters. So it was a bit crazy. But we got it done, and the event survived, and then we actually ended up running the same thing next year with an international flavour that we pulled together. We had more time to pull it together, but, you know, it was one of those things that we just couldn't afford to fail, and we just had to keep giving it everything we had. You know, the event business is not like selling cans of Coke. You know, once the Coke's run out, you can finish and go to the bar because you meet your quota. There's always something else that can be done. And I think that's the same in any business. You know, if you're looking to strive at the best business, the work's never done. You know?
And I guess if I was going to ask you the question about what mindset, what mentality did you need to have at the time, I guess that last sentence that you just said was probably it. The work's never done. Yeah,
the work's never done. And ironically, that weekend we actually also launched Speed Cafe the same weekend. So
right.
Give you a bit of an idea on how much stuff was going on. And we had a house on the track that we leased for the course of the event. I remember going there on the Sunday night about 11 o'clock, just opening a beer up, looking at the track, and just saying out loud to myself, you know, shit, how did we get that done?
Yeah.
You know, you look back on it now, and it makes me tired just thinking about it.
So you've mentioned BAM Group, which was something you did on the side, but then formalised into your own entity around 1992. Can you tell us a bit about this and what your advice would be to anyone listening to the podcast that might be thinking of starting out in their own shop?
Yeah, sure. I think there was an opportunity. I saw an opportunity niche in the market in the motorsport space to put my event together. I had some clients lined up. I was still working in the newspaper, sort of set up on the side, and then eventually took the punt on pulling it all together. You know, that was a risk. You know, there's always a bit of nervousness about that. And then I guess the next part of that is employing your first person, you know, making sure you get enough money coming in to be able to pay the bills. And then the next one is the second person. After that, it gets easy. Once you've employed two, it gets easy after that.
Yeah.
But, you know, they're the sort of things you go through early. And I guess, you know, if I was starting again right now, and we've got other businesses we start, so we, you know, other things that we're, you know, always trying, and we try and adapt the 30 years of experience we had, or 30 years plus. And it's, you know, having an exit strategy is number one. So basically reverse engineering it, saying, oh, well, I'm not going to be here forever. I'm going to work this. How do I create this into a business that someone else is going to want if I no longer want it anymore? And putting the systems in play, things, you know, simple things like your record keeping and just all those things that can make your life easier. Look at the technology that's available. Don't be scared of it. And then and use what's available to you, and just be passionate about it. If you're not passionate about it, you're not living and breathing it, well, then you're not doing what you need to do. You need to go and do something else. Yeah,
great advice. And you said that you guys are always trying new things, starting things. Is that where the term activation entrepreneur comes in?
I guess so. I think the tag that most people call me an ideas engineer, which is either you think that's a complete wank or you think that's pretty cool. But I'm an ideas guy, so you know, not all the ideas always work, but you've got to keep trying. And I think that's the great thing about the current environment with technology. What we've got, you can try things and you don't have to spend an enormous amount of money on rolling all this stuff out. You can try it, and then you think it's got some traction, then you can continue to do that. If not, you can pull back and head in a different direction. So making sure you remain as nimble as possible, and being in a situation to be able to pivot off the left or right foot, depending on which way you're going to go, and being able to adjust, I think, is really important.
Yes, super important.
Join our free Facebook group, Your Profitable Auto Repair Shop, and join in on the conversation with auto repair shop owners just like you globally.
So let's talk about speedcafe.com, which you founded in 2009 and has become one of the world's leading motorsport news websites. How did this happen, and what do you think makes it so successful?
Well, it happened because I saw a niche in the market and thought there was a gap that needed to be filled. I actually wanted to do it probably 18 months earlier, but I didn't have the cash to do it. And then eventually, you know, through our PR agency, we had some partners who I'd told about. They were keen to, you know, it's all about relationships, our business, and they were keen to help us do that and put some funds up to help us drive it. A couple of them are still with us today, to this, you know, 13 years later. And it was really taking old school journalistic ethics and applying it to a modern medium. So I'm a bit of a student of media and how it works, and talk to that point quite often at different functions or events or in a educational sense. And I think that it's one of those things where, you just got to, again, you're adapting, trialling things, make sure you've got the right people. We've had some great journalists over the years, and they've all worked their butts off. A 24/7 news cycle is, a little bit different to a weekly podcast, with all due respect. You got to live and breathe it. If something goes wrong at 2 a.m, then you've got to be on, be on track. And we provide so much information across all major forms of motorsport in the world. And obviously, geographically, that doesn't work great for us. Our guys are up at 3 a.m, making sure this stuff happens and pushing it out and making sure that everyone, when they wake up in the morning, knows what's happened and how it's progressed. So I think one of the instructions that I've always given my guys is I want to be first, but I don't want to be wrong. So anyone who comes to our site knows that when they go there, anything on there is correct. And that's one of the things the modern medium is, people will rush out of jumbo jet crashes. First thing they do, the journo Googles how many people fit in a jumbo jet. 348 people dead in a jumbo jet. And then they realise that, it's on a back flight from Buenos Aires to Rio, and there's 3 people on it. So all of a sudden you go from 348 people dead to 3 people dead, and then the audience just, starts to become white noise. It's like, what do we believe? What don't we believe? This is all, all a bit hard, and I think it's changed a lot in the last couple of years, but I think the agencies have actually realised that the audience has turned off because of that reason. So they will, they've actually started to tune that up a bit. We've never had that issue. That was, my guys always had strict instructions that we've got to be right.
Yep. Okay, so one final question around customer expectations. What advice do you have for our auto repair shop listeners out there when it comes to the importance of not only meeting your customers' expectation but exceeding it wherever possible?
I think it comes down to a pretty basic principle, and that's under-promising and over-delivering. So, you're not going to do X amount for a certain amount of money and then surprise them with a bill that's much higher. It's like, okay, we're going to do this. And then all of a sudden, people always like to feel like they're getting value for money. So it's like they want to feel like, they got a personal relationship with that person. No different to the guy who runs, my shop down the road. I bought a new car. I just take it straight to him because I trust him and I know I can ring him and say, hey, but I've got an issue here. Can you help me out? And he's going to help me out like he'll do. And we've had that relationship that's been built over 18 years, I guess, and my wife's the same. We've both got the same relationship, but all our vehicles have always been serviced through there. So I think that's just, familiarity. You're not getting ripped off. The guy's going to deliver what he says he's going to deliver. If there's an issue, he's honest about it. Okay, this is what it is. This is what it's going to cost. This is what it needs to be fixed. And, we've always, there's no second question about that, I don't think I ever have questioned him in all those years. Yep. So I think, just under-promising, over-delivering and just doing what you say you're going to do. And people just feel like they're getting value for money.
So get the basics right.
Yeah, and I don't think it's not always about cost. If people think they're getting service, I think there's a lot of that in this country. Like people just, they're just going for the cheap shit all the time, but I think that, it's slowly coming around that people actually pay for a bit extra for value, for service and, for quality. And I think that, as time we've seen that, I think during the COVID period, with cheap imports and and all of a sudden we're starting to realise the quality of the stuff that's been developed here and what we do have access to and how we've let that slip away from us, but how, there's a great opportunity for that to come back.
Yeah, wholeheartedly agree with you there. We very much support our clients to come up with a better value proposition at the Workshop Whisperer. So they would be very familiar with what you've just said there and be actively working on that with their customers every day.
Take a smoko and review us on your Apple Podcast app or wherever you listen.
Brett, thank you so much for spending the time with us on the Whispering Loudly podcast today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks for having me, and I hope it's been a bit of use, and I look forward to hearing it down the track.
Fantastic. Thank you. And if you would like your question answered about your auto repair shop on the next edition of Workshop Whispers on Whispering Loudly, just get in touch by sending an email to admin@workshopwhisperer.com with the subject line Workshop Whispers. See you next week.
Thanks for listening to Whispering Loudly, the award-winning Workshop Whisperer podcast, as featured by Apple with Rachael Evans, the #1 automotive business coach in the aftermarket. Thanks to Platinum sponsor Podium and Titanium sponsor Mechanic Desk.